going to move into organizational culture or corporate culture. But again, communications, what we found on the project we did with the 4 institutions was just really helping people understand what the scope was. We kept going back to what are we trying to accomplish as a team, and that influenced the decision-making process. So when they were actually making decisions, which were delegated out to the task force and stuff that we had from the different projects, they were actually given the authority to make decisions, but it had to be within the guidelines of what we were trying to accomplish as a project. And that one slide, I got it memorized. But the one slide we just kept showing over and over. And when we got off track, we just said, we got one slide that has like 5 items on it. They're really simple. And it just made it easier.
And I would just like to add, right, we don't get it right every time. Right? We're not sitting up here saying that we have the perfect organizations. Well, anyway, I'm not. Right? I don't know about them, but I'm not, right? We don't have the perfect organizations. This is what we try to do within our projects. And it's an every day, every hour, every minute of what we do is driving to succeed in what we're sharing here. It doesn't mean we've achieved that, or for me, I haven't achieved that success in every area that I have, but that's my goal. That's my vision of where I want to be. And that's what I want my legacy to be, is that I mentored and I grew staff. Not that I was able to implement an application, but that I mentored and grew staff, and staff are getting promoted. That's what I want my legacy to be.
I got to breathe on that one. Okay, so it's after lunch. You ready for the balloon joke? All right, so here we go. All right. So guy's in a balloon. He's drifting across the Great Plains. He gets lost. Didn't run out of fuel yet, so he's drifting along. He's in the jet stream. He's late for a meeting. Why is he in a balloon? He's late for a meeting, right? But anyway. So he drops down. He sees a man in a field, and he comes down and gets down to a lower level where he can communicate with them. And he says, "Hey man, where am I? Where am I?" He goes, "You're in a balloon about 30 feet above the ground with the longitude and latitude, blah, blah, blah." And he goes, "That's really helpful. You must be a software engineer." And so he goes, but where am I? And he goes, "You must be a project manager. You're still asking the same questions. I gave you the exact answer. And now, for some reason, it's my fault." So anyway, so that's kind of the blame game kind of thing. It's in the corporate culture, right? So you want it on the corporate culture side of our topic is, what kind of culture do you want to create? Do you want to create an environment where the project manager swoops down in their balloon and they point fingers at you and say, "Well, now it's your fault"? Or do you want to create a collaborative environment where they actually really help you out? In talking with each of these esteemed colleagues again, I talked with Karen about something about a learning organization. I'd like for her to kind of talk about that, and then the other two here, Vicky and Barbara, can talk about what they've done in their organizations around creating a corporate culture. Before you get started, the one interesting thing about these 3 projects is it's really neat, because when CTA was created, well, what used to be Do It, and then something else before that, right? So it had 3 name changes, but they actually basically got venture capital to start a company. So when Terry Takai there, Clark Kelso, was there, and then Terry Takai, and she got, I don't know what it was, $19 million to start a new company. I said, well, that's kind of cool. What are you going to do? And so these 3 projects are essentially, other than CA-MMIS has been around for a long time, they're brand new companies, right? So you got a brand new company with brand new people. You got to go recruit, advertise, solicit. You bring on a bunch of new vendors that don't know each other. You don't really have a corporate culture defined, or a long-term environment where you say, this is how it works in an organization. You get to actually create something brand new, and you get to define what that is. So we heard a little bit about vision earlier, of creating a vision of where I want to go. Vicky, what's my legacy, right? What kind of organization do I want to work in, that I want to go into work every day? So Karen, if you can talk about what you meant by a learning organization, and then others can share as well.
Yeah, so I think, again, just to add to what Greg said, with the Affordable Care Act, we're talking about something that was brand new. So we weren't replacing a system. We weren't automating a manual process that was in place. We were creating a brand new process, business process. So I think the culture that helped us be successful was one in which, first of all, of course, we didn't play the blame game. Nobody played the blame game because everybody at some point did something wrong. So it didn't, we didn't want to point the fingers at each other.
We're all guilty.
So, but even beyond that, it wasn't about blaming. It was about, continuing to move forward, continuing to make progress. So, we had a set of requirements in an RFP in 2012, in the middle of 2012. We awarded a contract to a systems integrator that came in to help us build this brand new system. But everybody, the contractor, the state, both state organizations, stakeholders, everybody recognized and agreed that coming into this effort, we didn't have all of the answers, and the answers would hopefully become clear as we went through that journey together between middle of 2012 and October of 2013. Unfortunately, not all of the answers became clear, so that was another story. But we had to make the best choices that we could, even though we didn't have clear guidance in the way of laws or regulations or any of those things. So it was just very important that we had a culture of open communications between our project team, between our stakeholder groups, between our extended, our sponsors, and then our extended stakeholder groups, and that we, work together to come up with solutions. Pretty much anybody could say anything to anyone in any of the organizations. So it didn't matter if you were, sitting at a desk programming all day, or working on job aids, or the project director, or the director of one of our sponsor organizations. That we really were all allowed to step up and say, hey, I think we need to make a change. I think there might be a problem, and it was, and that was not looked down upon at all. It wasn't, in a lot of organizations, what I see is like, well, you got to go through the proper channels. Let's write this up. Let's go through this committee and that committee, and ultimately we'll take it up to the director. And we just didn't have that time to do that. So I think that was the culture that enabled us to get to the point of being able to launch. Now, stepping back, I'm not here to say that there isn't value in having some of that rigor in the way that you document decisions and in the way that decisions are presented. And in fact, just like I stated earlier, because we are not under the same kind of time considerations that we were previously, we are now starting to put in place some of that rigor. But that doesn't mean that we're going to eliminate the openness and the ability to raise concerns, to raise risks, to raise issues. That's very important, to always have that available to anybody on the project or within your sponsor organizations or your stakeholder groups. One of the things, I'll just tell a little story, do we have time? I will just tell a little story. One of the things that I didn't know coming into the project director position on CalHEERS was the amount of input that we would get from our stakeholder groups. And my first opportunity to be exposed to that was at one of the Covered California board meetings. It was before I even started working there, and I went to a Covered California board meeting, And Peter Lee, the director of Covered California, gave a little director's report that talked about what was going on in Covered California, and then they opened it up for public comment. Well, I had been at CalHEERS, and at CalHEERS, you had a board and you gave presentations, and public comment was allowed, but I think maybe once or twice a year, somebody would actually come up and give public comment. Well, after Peter finished his presentation and he opened it up for public comment, all of a sudden, literally about 75 people lined up, all to talk about what they wanted to see in our business and in our system. So, and it was open, allowed, consumed. We certainly didn't take everybody's opinions and suggestions. We couldn't, but it was all very open and allowed to move forward and considered as part of what we implemented.
So I'm going to give an opposite of that, right? So CA-MMIS has been around for a very long period of time. The previous vendor had been around for 30 plus years. So there was like a death in the family, right? So when a new vendor came in, the individuals that had been part of this organization for a very long period of time felt a loss. And so it was very, very difficult. And I came in the middle of that. And so I know we're going to talk about that, so I won't say too much. But what you have to do is you have to understand there are different periods of time when you're in a project that require different management skills and different management styles, right? And so you have to be intuitive to know what it is that you need to do. But I also had a very tight timeline that I had to meet, right? The marching orders I got when I got onto the project is you've got to get this implemented by this date, right? That requires a very autocratic type of environment. And so going on to the project, nobody really knows me, right? You become autocratic. So when that is over and you're moving into system replacement and you're telling people you truly are democratic, who believes you, right? Because for the last 9 months, I was driving really hard. And those of you that were part of that project know that, right? But we managed through that and we were successful. But it has now taken time. Our organization has to change because now we're trying to establish what we want long term, which is more of that democratic type of organization. And so it's a really polar opposite of what, Karen and I think Barbara will share with you. When you lose a vendor that's been around for 30 years, it really is tough for staff, and you got to balance that with what it is that you're trying to accomplish.
So for Fiscal, we would be more, if you had a textbook on how to build an organizational culture, we were the do everything the opposite way. We were bringing employees in from partners who aren't our employees. They are actually employees of our partners. So they don't actually work for Fiscal. So they have their own partner, their own departments they work for. So they're bringing in their own set of organizational cultures. We did a 2-stage procurement, which was great, but that means we spent 9 months co-located with 3 different vendors who, when we first started out, we were the first project to ever do that, so Vicky can attest. The first rules we were told was you can't even say hi to them in the hallway. You can't smile at them. You can't do anything. So we had this rigorous procurement where you weren't supposed to, it was secret, confidential. You weren't supposed to talk to them to, hey, they're your friends. They're co-located. They're sitting next to you. You're not only supposed to talk, you're supposed to talk about everything. No secrets, you're sharing ideas, you're collaborating, and how do you build that? How do you take those same people, and at the same time, we went from an organization of, I think, 60 or 70 people in 2012 to we're about 480 people located in our building right now. So in a very short time, who you sat next to, who you sat with, who was on your team, who you reported to was changing every day. Just constantly changing. You had people from all these different organizations. You didn't know, do you report to Fiscal? Do you report to SCO, STO, DGS, staff, or are you a vendor? who are you today? And, where'd you go? Because you're somebody else today. It has been really, really a challenge to develop a culture in Fiscal, and it has taken us quite a bit of time. But one of the tips I'll give you that I think is important, and I know, Karen, you probably didn't have this opportunity because you had to do it so quickly, but your policies and your procedures are key. Developing those policies and procedures so everybody knows how you're operating. And I know that sounds boring and it's not pretty or fancy, but how do you operate? How do you, it's not just the decision-making frameworks, but what are your policies about alternate work week schedules? What are your policies about telecommuting? So that you're treating everybody the same, so that everybody knows what the expectations are in the workplace. What are your basic, we were creating a whole department. The Department of Fiscal never existed. Technically, we're still under the Department of Finance, but the Department of Finance has been kind of saying, okay, you're your own. We don't really want to manage 500 people. Take off on your own. So, it's hard to build an organizational culture as you're trying to build a project and you've got all your deadlines on your project and all these things you're trying to manage. You're trying to manage your vendor and your vendor relationships and all of that at the same time. But I think it's really key to just don't forget the fundamentals and the basics. Those things that are just part of, if you're an existing department and you've got all those things already, great. But if you're not, don't forget them. They are key because they are the things that people lean to about expectations and behaviors and, who gets to do what and those kinds of things. And I think that we've really started to work on that in the last about year and a half. And I've seen our culture kind of become a little more adhesive and a little more, it's becoming growing a little bit better. And I think that that's been one of the real keys to it.
So it's audience participation time. So I got two questions for you guys. One is how does organizational culture impact your hiring process? What kind of questions do you ask? What kind of people do you want to be on your team? So what do you guys do? I'm sure you've been on panels, right? Does it? Another joke. You guys are falling asleep. It absolutely does, right? So when you define your culture, you can't just come and say, I want an organizational culture like this. This is the place I want to work, right? It evolves over time, and like you guys have already discovered, evolves over many years. And sometimes it reaches a state where it feels good. But the only way you get there is to have a plan. The only way to get there is to hire the people that you want to be part of your organization and weed out the people that don't fit. And those are difficult. It's a lot easier to hire people, right, than it is to get rid of the people that aren't conforming to the environment of collaboration and stuff that you want to have. So, what's that?
Do you have a trick?
A trick, yeah.
No.
A lot of it comes down to education. A lot of it comes down to communicating your policies. It comes down to we're going to do a thing this year, which we tried to do earlier this year. It's going to be this fall. It's Consulting 101. During that day, when we have everybody on site, we're going to talk about the kind of company that we have and that we want to have and the changes that we want to make in the organization. We're continuing to make changes in our company, communicate that to our team. And we've also modified, we've made about 20 changes since last January. Nick is here, he works for me, he can attest to that. Our entire hiring process has changed to make sure we bring in the people that fit and to bring in the right people in the organization. And so when we're trying to define a culture that we want, like you guys have done, the hiring process definitely impacts how that evolves. And when they don't fit, man, you sure know when they don't fit. Because they say, this isn't how we work together on projects. So, you ready for the next joke? All right, okay. Actually, I usually don't tell jokes, so this is new to me, so I'm like stretching the boundaries of my skill set. All right, so it's a bar joke. No, just kidding, I won't do that. So there's three people, I won't say men or women, there's three people walking down the sandy beach. You can imagine they start to drift away, right? And they're walking around, one of them stumbles on top of an object buried in the sand, right? So they kind of wonder what it is, right? Maybe it's a dead fish or something, but it's not. It's actually a genie bottle. Dig it out, dig it out. Ah, this is really cool. You know, is this real? Yeah, we'll go ahead and rub the bottle. Instead of rubbing the bottle, poof. Right, genie pops out. Wow, you get 3 wishes, but there's only 3 people, so each one of you get 1. Where do you want to start? Oh, software engineer. So 3 people are project manager, software engineer, and a hardware engineer. Software engineer, let me go first. Okay, what do you want to do? I want to go to St. Thomas, and I want to go enjoy life on the beach, blah, blah. Your wish has been granted. Awesome, that's great. Yeah, it's fantastic. So hardware engineer, yeah, I want to go next. They're all extroverts, so otherwise they'd just be kind of hiding back, waiting for last. So hardware engineer goes, yeah, I want to take my wife on a cruise on a ship, and starting tomorrow. Nah, starting right now. Okay, wish has been granted, right? Project manager's last, right? He should be last, project manager. So what's your wish? Well, I want the 2 guys to come back right after lunch and get back to work on my project. Vetoed. All right, anyway, that was my attempt.